there's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Weird.
Rachel Zegler's ascent in Hollywood wasn't merely rapid. It was dazzling, virtually instantaneous. She transitioned from a relatively obscure YouTube cover artist to Steven Spielberg's chosen lead for West Side Story. It was the sort of fairy tale premiere most performers would die for, and briefly it appeared like she might genuinely succeed. Youthful, gifted with the industry at her disposal. But then everything began to collapse. Allegedly both Steven Spielberg and Francis Lawrence, two of Hollywood's most esteemed filmmakers, have had such dreadful behind-the-scenes encounters with Zegler that they've effectively excluded her from future endeavors. Yes, excluded the type of fallout that can wreck an entire career before it even secures a second chapter. How did she shift from being Spielberg's favored talent to the warning story murmured about in industry? Networks? What truly transpired on those sets and why?
Rachel Zegler is extraordinarily woke, but she's woke in a way that's quite deranged.
Insiders now claiming that some of the most influential directors in the industry want nothing further to do with her. It's one matter to mishandle a project. It's another thing entirely to sever ties with the very individuals who constructed your career from nothing, but that's allegedly where Zegler finds herself ostracized, shunned, and no longer shielded by the same system that once propelled her into the limelight. And believe us, this narrative runs far deeper than just negative feelings. If even half of what's being reported is accurate, it could clarify why her once blazing career has all but halted, and why even Disney appears to be withdrawing. But first, let's revisit where it all began. The Spielberg scenario, when Rachel Zegler secured the starring role of Maria in Steven Spielberg's 2021 West Side Story. It was a major milestone not just for her, but for the entire field. Spielberg didn't merely select her, he unearthed her. This was a legendary filmmaker with 4 decades of iconic movies under his belt hand, picking a total novice to headline his cherished musical remake. It was a Hollywood anointment, and initially Zegler appeared appreciative. She said all the appropriate things in press tours. She struck the chords. She beamed for the cameras, but something allegedly began to change once the spotlight shone on her. Permanently, insiders reported that Zegler's demeanor on set rapidly shifted from eager newcomer to problematic star, not in the classic yelling, into a mirror style, but in a more subtle form, passive-aggressive grievances, persistent, challenging of direction, and allegedly a tendency of belittling crew members. But the true breaking point, her remarks during the West Side Story promotional tour. Zegler began issuing odd statements about the film itself. Statements that reportedly stunned Spielberg. She labeled the original 1961 version obsolete, suggested it was flawed, and asserted that this version was the only one that counted some. Even claimed she described Spielberg's vision as antiquated behind his back. Let's be honest, Spielberg is one of the most influential and respected figures in Hollywood. He's collaborated with literally everyone from Tom Hanks to Meryl Streep to Oprah. He's a figure who commands loyalty and admiration, and not just because of his achievements. So when Zegler began openly criticizing the genre, the narrative, and even the very period that inspired West Side Story, it wasn't just insensitive, it was disrespectful, according to sources close to the production. Spielberg was profoundly disappointed by her conduct during the press cycle. One insider even stated he regretted the casting by the end. That's not a minor claim. We're discussing a director who advocated for her, who protected her, and in return, he was criticized by his own star in the media. Allegedly, there were post-film discussions behind closed doors, discreet ones with producers and fellow filmmakers about how Rachel Zegler might not be worth the hassle. That's when the separation began. She didn't participate in some critical industry events where Spielberg's influence was strong. People observed, rumors circulated, and by the time awards season arrived, Zegler's name was already beginning to recede into the background, and it didn't assist when she took jabs at other Hollywood icons. Either Zegler appeared to establish a pattern, denouncing beloved classic films, ridiculing conventional tropes, and presenting herself as the new face of Hollywood while destroying all the connections. Behind her, whatever transpired between Zegler and Spielberg, it's evident it wasn't just a one-time miscommunication. It was an accumulation of warning signs, the kind of behavior that prompts a director to say never again, and in Spielberg's case, reportedly declare it loudly enough for the rest of the industry to hear. But if Spielberg's silent exclusion was astonishing, what occurred next with the Hunger Games director Francis Lawrence elevated things to a whole new dimension. If Rachel Zegler ruined her first connection with Spielberg. She virtually demolished the next one with Frances Lawrence. Fresh off the acclaim of West Side Story, Zegler was cast as Lucy Gray Baird in The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. This wasn't just any part. It was the lead in a billion-dollar franchise prequel directed by none other than Frances Lawrence, a man who had already directed 3 Hunger Games blockbusters. It should have been a guaranteed success, but allegedly it was a catastrophe. While early press depicted Zegler as a fresh, bold voice for the franchise, murmurs from within the production revealed a completely different story. Crew members began discussing off the record naturally about her conduct on set. Word spread that she was consistently tardy, sometimes delaying shoots by over an hour. But worse than the delays, the attitude sources claimed Zegler frequently clashed with Lawrence over creative direction. Not just minor suggestions here and there, full-blown disputes. Mid-scene revisions and confrontational arguments over her character's tone. Let's be clear, Frances Lawrence is not some inexperienced novice director. He's collaborated with Jennifer Lawrence, Julianne Moore, Donald Sutherland, Philip Seymour. Hoffman knows how to manage powerhouse talent, but Zegler, according to sources, crossed a boundary. One production assistant alleged she would blatantly disregard direction and then perform scenes her way, asserting it felt truer to the character. Allegedly, these power struggles became so regular that the atmosphere on set shifted. Tension emerged. People began avoiding confrontation entirely just to complete the day. Multiple scenes were said to have needed reshoots, not because of technical problems, but because the original footage was unusable due to Zegler deviating from the script. Frances Lawrence, known for his calm and focused demeanor, reportedly became more reserved and irritated as filming progressed. Behind closed doors, he allegedly confided to producers that casting Zegler had been a mistake. The term unmanageable began being mentioned. Some crew even jested that the true antagonist of the film wasn't President Snow, it was Lucy Gray Baird. Off camera, and the irony, she had nearly declined the role altogether. She told press she initially rejected it before her boyfriend, fellow actor Josh Andres Rivera, persuaded her otherwise. But if the rumors are accurate, Frances Lawrence might have wished she adhered to her initial instinct. By the time Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes concluded, it was apparent this wasn't a Jennifer Lawrence repeat. There was no warmth, no camaraderie, no future project murmurs. In fact, the silence between Zegler and Frances Lawrence since the premiere has been striking. Not a single social media mention, no interviews together, no reference to one another post-release. That's not just a coincidence, that's a Cold War. And it only worsened when Zegler began doubling down in public, igniting the next phase of her decline. If Zegler's behind-the-scenes conduct didn't ruin her career, her public image might have done the job for her. The moment she began speaking out, the internet began noticing, and not in the way she anticipated from the outset. Rachel appeared oddly determined to dismantle the very legacy she was entering. She openly criticized classic films, labeling them offensive and outdated, often without context or subtlety. Some fans called it courageous, but many in the industry called it careless. One of the most damaging moments came during the Snow White controversy in 2022. Disney cast Zegler as the lead in their live-action remake of the iconic film on paper. This was a dream opportunity, but Zegler's interviews rapidly became a PR disaster. She ridiculed the original Snow White story in multiple interviews, calling it strange that a prince would fall in love with a woman just because she was beautiful and asleep. She described the original fairy tale as disturbing and said her version of Snow White would be a leader who wouldn't dream of waiting for a man to save her. And while reimagining a character can be empowering, Zegler's delivery came off as dismissive, arrogant, and according to many, deeply ungrateful. The backlash was swift. Fans, critics, and even former Disney loyalists condemned her comments as insensitive. "Why accept a role in a film you clearly despise?" became the rallying cry online. And it wasn't just audiences turning industry professionals began to wince. Disney executives reportedly scrambled to mitigate the damage. Word is Zegler's team was asked to curb her interviews. At one point, Disney allegedly removed her from several promotional appearances, entirely fearing she'd dig an even deeper hole. The term PR liability began following her around like a bad odor, and the damage showed. Snow White's promotional campaign, which should have been a fairy tale rollout, was quietly reduced. Red carpet events were minimized, trailers were delayed, merchandise never launched at scale, and when the film finally released, it flopped badly. Box office numbers plummeted, audiences stayed away, and many insiders blamed Zegler's public image as a primary reason. Even her co-stars reportedly maintained their distance. Rumors circulated that some cast members were done with her by the time press junkets began. Behind-the-scenes executives allegedly debated whether to sever Zegler from future Disney deals entirely. It's one thing to have opinions. It's another to sabotage the very hand feeding you. And in Hollywood, that kind of defiance doesn't just get noticed, it gets punished. And with Spielberg and Lawrence already stepping back, Zegler was beginning to look like toxic material. But somehow she wasn't finished yet. Rachel Zegler's journey serves as a reminder of the unpredictable nature of fame, from celebrated newcomer to controversial figure. Her story highlights the importance of professionalism and public perception in Hollywood. As she embarks on new endeavors, the industry and audiences alike will be observing to see if she can reclaim her place among the stars.